Welcome back to Morning Express. We're glad you're watching on this Tuesday. It is the last day of March. We're glad you're with us from Martins Energy on the Business Chat with Michael Gitonga. It is time to move on to a person of interest this morning. And as we told you earlier, today we host the State House spokesperson. That's Manoah Esipisu. And quite a number of you have been sending in your questions on Twitter. So we'll make a point of putting those questions to him. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
One of the questions that somebody put out there was, what was Manoah doing before he became spokesperson? And I remember, to many, you were introduced at the media breakfast, State House, that you're going to be the spokesperson. Were you part of the campaigns? Were you part of Team Jubilee prior to the, Jubilee government coming into office?
No, I wasn't. Before I was a spokesperson, I was a spokesperson.
Okay.
I was public affairs advisor to the president of the African Development Bank, in which role I spoke for him. And before that, I was a spokesperson at the Commonwealth Secretariat. So it's a kind of role I've done for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And before that?
Before that, I was a journalist, financial journalist with Reuters, whom I spent quite a bit of time with.
Yeah.
My roots are in financial journalism. I practiced it, I taught it. I mentor people in that sphere,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really where my passion was before I found other avenues to express and fulfill my ideals.
So growing up, the young Manoah wanted to be a journalist, or what?
Yeah, actually, in high school, I used to write longhand reports and pin on the notice board for fellow pupils to come and read.
Mm-hmm.
And this young lad called Paul Muhoho, I believe, he was at Menengai High School.
Right.
He used to publish in the national newspapers. So he was quite some kid to look up to.
Mm-hmm.
And the front page is always excited, looking at the names there. And you felt maybe these guys are making a difference, and I do want to make a difference.
Yeah.
So that was the story at the time. And when I came to college in Nairobi, I remember walking down to Likoni Road one day, which was the home of the Standard newspapers, and asking to see the editor-in-chief.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if you came down to Likoni Road, usually the matatu stopped right at the top of the road there,
yes.
and you had to walk down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're quite dusty by the time you got to the Standard offices. And so telling the receptionist you wanted to see the editor-in-chief was quite comical, actually.
Yeah, and they're looking at you and they're like, uh-huh.
Yeah. You say, who sent you? And you say, no one sent me.
Yeah.
But because of the insistence eventually I saw the guy, and the story started there. So in my first year at college, I was writing for the Standard.
For the Standard, okay.
And it became, by the time I got out of college, I went to Reuters, because I'd been at the Standard, of course, for three and a half years.
Yeah.
Doing a full-time job while at school full-time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there to Reuters, which opens you up to this global coverage and reporting. What has been some of your highlights that you would tell us about when you were at Reuters?
First, there has to be transformation, I think.
Yeah.
I came in as at Standard. I was a sports writer, and that's where
You've done it all.
my passion was.
Business.
And from sport, I was an amateur actor, so I did a lot of theater work.
Wow.
And moving to Reuters, then they told me, look, really, we don't cover a lot of sports. We didn't bring you here because we think we need good sports reporting.
Yeah.
We brought you here because of good writing, and we think that can be transformed to contribute to the financial file, which is what Reuters was known for, still is known for, financial news. And I can assure you that was like a really, really sharp difference from what I was used to.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't come in with a background in finance.
So you learned a lot on the job.
And yeah, I did. And my first stories were atrocious. I remember I used to sit next to my sub, seeing her transform my copy.
And it would be a complete opposite of what you'd written
initially. I could only recognize my name on the copy. And then eventually...
And for a journalist, that sucks. Yeah.
Yes, that was really difficult.
It's a harsh indictment.
Yeah, but then, of course, you face the realities. Look, I haven't come from a history of finance, but if I am going to be a good reporter in finance, I'm going to have to acquaint myself with the basic issues. So, well, Reuters we helped me start with that journey. Took me to financial school. So they did the training and stuff, the basic stuff. We did up to diploma level in financial analysis. And
so you were
like
fully, specifically trained and focused on finance?
Yeah.
Okay.
So to a level where I became more at home with business and business people than I was with our top stars on the tracks.
On the tracks.
Yeah.
So how long were you in Reuters for?
Just over 10 years.
After 10 years.
Yeah.
Then now moved over to the world of diplomacy?
Yeah, then I went to... Actually, I spent a year, with my last year at Reuters as well, teaching financial journalism for the master's degree at Wits University in Johannesburg. And while I was there, I got this call about a certain possibility at the Commonwealth. And the caller said, well, we're just taking the chance because we don't think that you are likely to move, but to move from Reuters. But we have been asked to have a net that is wide enough.
Yeah.
So should you be interested, let us know. And I thought, yeah, maybe a decade down, you need to look at other challenges.
Yeah.
You need to explore other things. And so when I went for this interview eventually, I thought, yeah, why not?
Okay, and you've interacted with many journalists here locally in Kenya, Jeff Koinange, my boss as well, Joe Ageo. What do you make of the industry here? And for Jeff, you saw him on TV on KTN and thought what?
I thought he could be good for us. I was at Reuters at the time.
Yes.
We had the Africa Journal program, which was it's a strong African production that did not have strong Africans reporting.
Yeah.
And so I called him up actually, and he was in the KTN newsroom, and told him, could we have breakfast? And we did. And I told him, maybe you should come and see my bosses at Reuters. And his journey on that path also began that way.
Okay.
The other lads and lasses, we've had a long history of capacity building. So, well, what is it that I can do for my country from where I am? And I was in a position to send people on training, to send to get people accepted on scholarships that Reuters funded or backed. And so I have then had the opportunity to bring along people on that journey.
On that journey.
Because eventually, if you claim to be anything good, if you move, there has to be a successor, and that successor, you would have had a role in training them. And if you've done nothing of the sort, then you really don't have a legacy in the space in which you're coming from.
Okay. Before we get to more national issues, finally, perhaps your thoughts on the crop of journalists we have now. I know sometimes now, of course, in your position as spokesperson, once in a while, you'll not be reading from the same script. But in terms of professionalism, the crop of journalists we have across the board, what do you make of the industry?
I think two things. One, that newsrooms are forever younger.
And is that a good thing?
It means that there is no institutional memory sometimes. It means sometimes there isn't as much preparation as there should be going into a story. I think that's one thing. On the other side, I think because of commercial interests, there is less funding for research, for investigative work. So I don't expect that your bosses would allow you to go away for 2 to 3 weeks chasing one story, if it's just going to be a one-off story. I think
But we do around here on KTN. With our special desk, Mohammed Ali, John Al Namu. Well, yes.
Those happen and infrequently across the media. They really don't exist. People tend to report the now for now because you are remembered in the newsroom for your current headline, not for your yesterday. It is about today and what you can deliver tomorrow.
Correct.
And I think in life eventually it is what you are now and tomorrow rather than what you are yesterday. And that is so entrenched in the newsroom that if you are not a headline deliverer today, then really you are off to the woods.
Okay. Well, we will...
But maybe just one more thing I should say about that. There has to be a sense in our newsrooms that the story has to be approached in a fairly objective way.
Correct.
We do not have... I don't want people to favor us, but I don't want people to be subjective just because they think, well, when you're dealing with government, you must start from a situation where you think government is guilty. No, government is not necessarily guilty
that's something Patrick Gadara says here all the time, that you must approach that story already from guilty. They need to prove themselves innocent.
Yeah, look, Mr. Ben Chumo was just saying right now about his 500 megawatts on the grid. That's verifiable. There isn't room for doubting what is verifiable. That's one of the things I say. If you're saying that, look, as the president was saying, we've moved the primary schools on the national grid from 8,000 to 18,000 in 2 years, that's verifiable. It's not something that you take for granted, for instance.
Right.
If you wanted, you can verify every single one of those things we are saying.
Okay.
And I only ask that people actually approach these things in that way.
In that way. Let's begin with yesterday's press conference, the announcement at State House that President Barack Obama will be visiting the country later on this year, July, for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. It's a big one. The first time a sitting head of state, sitting president from America is visiting the country. First, do we know details of this particular trip before we go into other details in terms of how long he'll be here for? Will he visit his hometown? What do we know? We
don't know specificities of whether he will go to his hometown or not. His hometown isn't in Kenya, I would say. It's in Hawaii.
His hometown, as in his Kenyan roots hometown, as in where he went when he came as senator
but
last.
He would be here with the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, which he's partly here to attend. Is from the 26th to the 23rd of July. So you would expect that during that period he will be here for some time. The Entrepreneurship Summit itself brings together young innovators, global financial leaders, and leaders in government. We would expect maybe about 1,200 to 1,500 guests in Nairobi for that event.
Right.
It's a massive forum. And he is partly here for that. He's also here for bilateral discussions with his host, our president, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and also with other senior leaders in government. We do know for sure he will be here during that period. We can't give specific details.
As of now.
Yes.
Well, the question is, with this particular announcement coming into office, it was seen as the Jubilee government was very much focused on the East. Of course, the CS Foreign Affairs had come out to say we're looking to enrich and grow all our relations. But in the speech by President Kenyatta last year, October, in Addis Ababa, he used some very harsh words. It was a very tough talking rather harsh tone towards the Western countries. Some of what he said, let me read to you. That Your Excellencies, the philosophies, ideologies, structures, and institutions have visited misery upon millions for centuries, ultimately harm their perpetrators. Thus, the imperial exploiter crashes into the pits of penury. The arrogant world police, who is perceived to be the US here, is crippled by shambolic domestic dysfunction. And these are the spectacles of Western decline we are witnessing today. So talking about the declining imperial powers now. Do you now regret the tone, does the president do, that was used in that particular speech?
Not at all, actually. There is a time and place for everything. There's a time and space and tone for the utterances a leader like ours makes. If you look at the president's general philosophy, which is you have traditional friends, but you must embrace new friends.
Correct.
How do you show your intimacy with friends, for instance? It's the partnership that you embrace. How deep is your partnership? The deepness of your partnership is demonstrated by the interactions you have with that partner. And we see the references to the East, for instance. The president has been to China. The Prime Minister of China has been here. The president has been to Japan. We do expect that if we do host the Tokyo International Conference on Africa's Development in 2016, we do expect the Japanese Prime Minister would be here.
So the president sticks by his word. The State House, the presidency does not in any way change position, how it felt about the U.S. at the time.
We haven't, we said Western powers. We didn't say the U.S. What we know about the U.S., and it's traditional, we have long friendship, we have deep friendship. We want to enhance that partnership. We have worked with the U.S. on security, on governance, on entrepreneurship, and lately on the Power Africa initiative to light homes. As with any siblings, you always have moments of friction, and that will not go away. However, what's the key that we are both looking at? The U.S. values and our values are really the same values. That we are at the forefront of democracy in this region. We are at the forefront of growing our economy, ensuring that our people are not left behind in this transformation. The U.S. thinks the same. So we are sharing values and partnership. And I think that is one thing that just didn't go away.
And following the passage of the security laws, again, the U.S. criticized Kenya for the same, and we saw a rather harsh reply to that criticism by the U.S. Again, the language that was used, it appears that how the government, the presidency, it was a communication from PSU to the U.S., very acrimonious at that particular time. Again, at these things, you feel that the U.S. sometimes holds itself in a place it should not.
We think that if you're friends, you will not necessarily shout about issues you have deep feelings about. We have diplomatic channels. The U.S. can feed through the system. If we have our own issues, we feed through the system. There is no single moment. There hasn't been any single moment that we are not in touch with the United States government or Britain or any other. We just are not good experts at megaphone diplomacy. We expect that if we have issues, as often issues are going to arise between partners or friends, those issues need to be settled within the system that you have created to settle them.
So they shouldn't issue out this kind of public statements. They should engage, you're saying?
You've got to engage. Well, why is a public statement going to help you? How is it going to help you? It comes down to approaching the relevant people in government.
So you're saying the U.S. needs to relook at how they engage with you, and as far as the issues they have with government, they need to engage through necessary channels and not make it a public affair.
I think that in most cases they do. I think that occasionally it doesn't happen.
Okay.
And I would say that happens with many governments across the world. It's not in our place to tell them how they should do their business. and we don't intend to tell them how they should do their business.
Right.
However, we are partners, and if you're partners, if you have values, you stick to a certain way of doing business.
Before we move away from the U.S. issue, whilst at the African Heads of State Summit, the president in an interview did say that Kenya and other African countries are not receiving enough support in the war on terror. There's been the issue of the travel advisories. Are these some of the issues we'll see the president, perhaps in his talks with President Obama, raise?
Yeah. Actually, we have come quite a long way from that period where we thought that maybe the U.S. wasn't doing as much as it ought to in the support in the war against terror. You will recall our president was in Washington in August for this African Leaders Forum.
Yes.
During that meeting, the U.S. president pledged this financial support and heightened security capacity building. That's been followed up by concrete steps. American experts have been here to look at how we're doing our business in that war against terror. Our people have been to Washington, to both the White House and the Pentagon,
yes,
to see how they do that business. We feel that gap is forever getting smaller. We think that they fully are on board in understanding that this is a global war, and that in a global war we need global approaches. Kenya can't do its own shenanigans, say, against any terror group. We need a global approach in which everyone recognizes Kenya is doing this, Uganda is doing this, the US is doing this. Even Japan recognizes that you can't just kind of leave security to a small group of countries. That's why they've just put up this $200 million
So you're saying since then,
fund. Yeah,
there's been more support from
There's
the US.
been a lot of movement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are those still some of the issues we'll see, or what is the president keen to have in those closed-door meetings with the U.S. president?
It's always going to be first our partnership.
Okay.
You must strengthen the partnership, and along that you go with the values. Secondly, we do have interest in building our economy, in growing our economy, and ensuring that it's in a sustainable way that leaves no one behind. Obviously, one of the big things for the U.S. is the energy thing with the Power Africa Initiative, for instance. We want to deepen that. We want as many homes as we can be connected to the national grid to be connected, and generally around the area of investment. The President Obama is here partly, as I said, for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, and that's about business. That's about looking for opportunities in that in time will grow jobs for the Kenyan people.
Okay, let's shift our attention from the U.S. President visit. We'll wait to see. Of course, should be an interesting one, and maybe State House will seek to allay concerns that Kenyans may have that when he comes, it will be a complete shutdown, as of had to move around, had to communicate because of the huge security detail he usually will travel with. But let's talk matters corruption now. And yesterday, again, the former Prime Minister coming back to the country and issuing a statement. So on one hand, we have some of the commissioners from the EACC saying they're not aware of that list the President annexed on his State of the Nation address. What do you make of this kind of statements from commissioners of the EACC?
I don't think it's in my place to comment on comments from commissioners. I haven't seen that they have told the President that we do not think this is a genuine list. No one is saying that this list is not genuine.
Raila is calling it fraud. He says the EACC report is a fraud.
Well, he would have to have his reasons for that. I don't think that he says... I think what I have heard him argue about is how and why it was handed to the President. And I think that is that's a frivolous thing. You look at what is the import of the list. What are the allegations in the list? Meaning, what is the content of this report? You don't look at... If it's very trivial to figure out what was the process. But to deal with the issue itself, the Constitution itself allows all statutory commissions to hand their reports to hand reports to the president, and the Constitution expects the president to address Parliament on the progress in implementing various things, including our values. Now, the president cannot manufacture those things. Those things have to be handed to him by the agencies the Constitution has granted the right to prepare.
Okay.
And so I would expect the president can call in on any agency and say, look, what's the progress on this one? I want a report. And the Constitution then demands that that commission or that agency hand over the report. Now, should the president give it to Parliament? I think you heard the president himself say he was taking an extraordinary step. Why extraordinary? Because the Kenyan people have been, over some time now, saying, look, you must deal firmly with corruption. And in our view, going to Parliament, handing over this report and saying, we must draw a line and start to fight on the basis of the content that we have. Really, you can't run away from that.
So what is it you hope to be done? Because some of the questions that have been coming through is some of our viewers are asking that now that it has been given to Parliament, will Parliament be investigating? How exactly does this see to it that these issues are expedited and brought to a close?
Just yesterday, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission formed a joint task force to complete the investigations and move to prosecution the cases that need to be moved to prosecution.
Okay.
It is the work of those two bodies to prosecute. The reason it was presented to Parliament is because us, our supreme lawmaking body, it needed to take note of this report and the fact that the president has asked the agencies concerned to move along and get this work. But the key thing about here is, number one, that the president does not assign any guilt or otherwise to any person involved or mentioned in the report. The president is saying, look, we cannot cast aspersions on people without due process. Let due process be done, and let it be done quickly, so that people can move along with their lives. If you are culpable of anything, the law will take its course. If you are not culpable for anything, you resume your work. Let the country move on.
So we're saying the cabinet secretary is a step aside. Stepping aside is a terms that some people have had an issue with because it's not in our laws. We have interdict, suspend, separate, which is fire, or demote. So what is this stepping aside?
Stepping aside is effective suspension.
Suspension.
You are not at work.
So what is it that it means for these cabinet secretaries that have stepped aside? Are they on half pay? What exactly are they saying in their statements, and what does it mean for them?
The terms I cannot say because I haven't looked at their letters sent to them.
Okay.
And all of them have received letters. It is something we can return to. But it does mean that they do not hold...
They stand suspended.
Yeah, they stand suspended. They don't have they don't hold the privileges, rights, responsibilities, powers of the office.
It is yesterday that we heard the Cabinet Secretary Lands Charity Ngilu talk about her stepping aside. But prior to that, it was a statement from your office, from the presidency, indicating that she would be stepping aside. Was there resistance from her initially? Yes, she was out of the country, but surely she would have communicated directly at the time this announcement was made.
No, she was out of the country, and well, you have to understand, in a lot of countries, sometimes connectivity is an issue. I think people take things here for granted, that your phone works and you have 3 cell phones and your internet works on your mobile piece. These things don't happen in every country. I think that to the extent that she was reached and informed of this decision, she immediately said she would be falling in line with the president's directive.
So there's no resistance, because what also adds credence to those who believe there's a resistance from her end is some of her statements yesterday. She said some powerful people are pushing the president to make decisions targeting those who are devoted best performance in government. And she said that she believes she's one of those. So she does not appear to be too happy with this decision, even to step aside.
Well, that is really for her to say. what the president has done is to put forward a report and say everyone in this report needs to take responsibility. And it doesn't matter who you are. The president himself said there will be no sacred cows. And if there are going to be no sacred cows, then there are no sacred cows. That's the approach he takes.
Okay. And the other concern is the 60 days that the president said that, yes, this matter needs to be expedited. But we saw recently a report from the EACC, 3 cases successfully prosecuted in 3 years, which is to say 1 case per year. So 60 days, you have 175 individuals on that list. Really, for those who said that this is just another PR exercise by the government, because these people, after those 60 days, they'll all be back in office, can this really, any useful, important progress be made in 60 days, going by the track record of these organizations and the capabilities they have?
First, you know, that's another PR exercise by the government. You know, it's not us who are saying that we are the fastest African growing economy. We are not. Other people are. We are the 3rd behind China and the Philippines in emerging markets. That's not us saying. Other people are. It's not us just saying, look, the government has added 480,000 new households to electricity. Other people are. So this is not PR. This is actual work, verifiable.
But those are legitimate concerns going by the past that Kenya has had in this war against graft.
Let's deal with these things.
Yes.
One, that the DPP's office and the EACC obviously recognize the challenges that there are. That's why yesterday they formed this joint task force, so that this work can be done fairly quickly. Secondly, 60 days, you know, 60 legal working days. 60 legal days means 60 working days. You know that judges and, and prosecutors and people like that don't work at the weekends. It's a Monday to Friday sequence. So if you consider that, you actually have sufficient time for people to do work, if they're doing it in the manner in which they should. Should they encounter difficulties, obviously, they would come back to the president and say, look, this is what we have done. This is what we need to do to complete.
So the president could extend that time?
He hasn't shown any indication that he's willing to waver. But
in the event they came and asked for more time?
They would have to cross that bridge if it came to that. What we are saying is that, look, you have to deliver justice, and to deliver justice there's a process. And that process has to be one that allows the work to be done properly. However, it is not an endless game. You've got to draw a line and say, these investigations are complete. The cases going for prosecution have gone to prosecution. They have closed. The cases, the files are dealt with. You can't kind of just say, look, we will investigate these cases for 5 years. People's names, people's reputations are involved.
So your confidence is drawn from the fact that there's a special team that has been put together, and so 60 days is not out of the world idea for many who look at this as really, it is not, nothing much is going to be achieved in that period of time.
Kenyans have a great history of getting the job done when they want to get the job done.
Okay.
We expect that they will take that spirit on this one, get the job done.
There, Githongo has called and said in a statement the other day that the president perhaps should have, in showing his seriousness in this war on graft, fired those he can, like cabinet secretaries and other officials, and he has appointed, and the constitution allows him to, because many a times, again, going back, we've seen many of those that have been suspended after all these investigations get back to office. Is this something that you would see the president would consider to do?
I think that Githongo sometimes is a contradiction. He speaks in the name of the rule of law and procedures and processes, and yet expects people to be crucified without due process. I can't say, look, Sophia, I think that laptop is not, that iPad is not yours, so maybe you should be suspended. I think it's almost silly to argue like that. You've got to put forward a case and say, look, you are being accused of A, B, C. We think that we can take that through the process. If then investigators come back and tell you, look, we have such a strong case that this is going to lead to a conviction, then you are in a position to say, well, we need to review where we are. But you can't start from saying, hey, this guy has been accused of this and that, so fire him. What type of nonsense would that be?
Okay, those who are concerned that you have now some of those cabinet secretaries who have come out and said, Ngilua said she was never contacted, her side of the story never sought. Koskei was at the EACC, was told to go back, the detectives are not ready. So there's a sense that, yes, there are these allegations, but at no time was perhaps the input of the accused sought. Does the president still feel confident in that the EACC in this report did a good job? Or do these questions and queries that have been raised by these people concern him as well?
I think that the EACC has presented a report. You've got to deal with the veracity of the report. That's why it then goes through a process. Because you are not just saying, look, I am firing you on the basis of these accusations. Yes. You are saying, I would like these questions to be investigated. I would like your own situation brought on board with the evidence that is required. Right. And I would like that a final determination be made before I make a decision as to how we should move forward.
It is seen as it was an appeal to the conscience of the elected leaders to as well perhaps follow suit, step aside, resign, whatever it is, because the president cannot in fact direct them to do the same. And the governors, a number of other leaders have said they will not do that. You, in a statement, said that, and some have gone ahead to compare bring in the deputy president's issue and said that perhaps because he also has proceedings at the International Criminal Court, he should as well step aside. You have said that should not happen. Those are separate issues. But this is what one would argue, because again, in your statement, you said that their issues were fully canvassed on their suitability to hold office before the general election. So now that they've refused, and as most of them said, they don't intend to leave office for investigations, would you, the presidency, move to court to have their court, as they did in the case of the DP now and the president, determine whether they're suitable or not to hold office?
I think first that this report will itself be public today. And once it's tabled in the National Assembly and in the Senate, the Kenyan people will be able to see what each person accused of anything is being accused for.
Yeah.
So those details will emerge, and I believe that those details will be shocking to many Kenyans, and I think it's irresponsible to argue that, I am an elected leader, so I am not accountable for the ills I perpetrate while in office. That type of life is so yesterday.
However, is that the argument they're putting out? That is saying they're not accountable. They're just saying, this is someone said this, the other said the other. Just as in the case of which you quote of the deputy president, when the allegations, until they're proven, then somebody can continue to work, as we are seeing and we've seen with our leadership.
I think in terms of the Integrity Act, we were going to an election. Some people felt very strongly the president and the deputy president should not, in fact, go to that election as candidates. And so it went to the Constitutional Court, and it determined these guys are in office. These crimes have been, these allegations of crime are perpetrated by people in office. If they wish, and I think George Saitoti taught us that lesson, they can go to court to ask the court to absolve them if they feel that they have done nothing wrong.
But you're the one calling for them to step aside, and they're saying, why should I? I've not been found to have done any of these things. As you'd argue in their case, some people felt they were not fit to hold office. They'd also argue, you and perhaps those in that report argue they're not fit, but who has found that indeed they committed this ill they're accused of?
I think it becomes a case of legal hair splitting. Whether you split hairs now or tomorrow, it will catch up with you.
So you're not intending to pursue this any further? The president gave the directive. It's wishful thinking for some would say.
Sophia, the Constitution describes governors as state officers. And the president, speaking as a head of state, has given that directive that, look, you really need to step aside. Now, there is a lot of noise making by people who say, look, he can't force us to leave, and the president can't force us to leave and stuff like that. But I think when the weight of these allegations finally sinks in, which it in fact will, I think you should see the type of tune we then expect from those who are associated with this report.
But what else can the president do? What action can he take? You say they're public officers, so meaning what? If they refuse, then what?
I think then it's a question of taking advice. The Attorney General, the Chief Legal Officer, is partly there to give advice on how to move forward. Okay. The President has a Legal and Constitutional Affairs Officer. The advisor, I think he will take advice.
He will take advice. Yeah. Let's finally, before we again move away from this issue, yes, the Deputy President has that matter at the International Criminal Court that is still ongoing. But based on Chapter 6, there are those who have argued, should he not have left and leave office? Because there was the matter of the land case of Muteshi that he lost. He was found to have had it illegally. That just based on that particular matter that saw a ruling in court, then he's not fit to hold office. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the ICC has been canvassed widely, and our courts made the judgment on that. They are really separate issues. And I think that...
How are they separate? Because in terms of leadership, this is land that he had, did not belong to him, and the court found that, in fact, he had it wrongfully.
I am not quite conversant with how the land matter was canvassed. So I wouldn't really be in a position to comment on it, because I don't know the intricacies of that. I haven't seen the court judgment.
Yeah.
But what I can say for sure is that I don't know that there were questions at the time, I'm sure he would have responded to them.
Okay, because then people feel just based on that there was that kind of a ruling that put him and painted him in that light based on Chapter 6, then he's as well not fit to hold office. But that's, again, a question for another day. Our time is running out. I understand I have just about 5 minutes, so let's talk about other issues. The president's apology, again, lauded widely across the board, but many wonder whether the president is still keen to fulfill some of the promises he made. Post-Westgate, he talked about a commission of inquiry. Is it something that is still going to happen?
I think there was a multi-agency, multi-country forensic investigation, and then there was a parliamentary process. And the president felt that those two fed him with a sufficient report, pieced together in fairly good detail what happened, and that he would move forward on the basis of that information, rather than spend taxpayers' money on another commission of inquiry, which would have come to the same conclusions, he believed.
So there's a Presidential Strategic Communications Unit, PSCU, that has time and again been criticized. We even saw it go as far as the court leadership calling for its disbandment because of the manner, the language they will use, very unpresidential, many would argue. In fact, we've seen them engage in twiffs with court legislators. Is it a presidential communication unit, or is it a political jubilee communication unit? Because we see it trickle down to the political conversations. Break it down for us, this PSU and its function and mandate.
Well, the simple answer is that we are the president's communication team.
And that means you respond to politicians if they say certain things.
We may respond to politicians.
So when do you draw the line? In terms of, it's at this point we respond, at this point we don't.
I think that's really a result of internal processes. But we think that the key thing is that we get the president's message heard. And I think that we got a lot of criticism, especially last year, for some of the things our team said. But overall, I think if you were watching our year in office, you'd see what are the key things that you can remember? That electricity prices are coming down, that the president is keen on regional integration, that his place in Africa is really assured as one of the emerging leaders of our continent, that our case in the ICC was well covered and managed, that our country was growing.
Which is all good stuff, but people get concerned when this PSU is communicating for the presidency, and some of the language they'll use, like the letter they wrote, Mr. Odinga should stand with the people against terrorists and not the other way around. Some of the language, and people wonder, is this the president? Is this how the president speaks? Is this how the president feels about the country? And is this the kind of a language that surely should be coming from the presidency?
I think sometimes you'll find a belligerent language. And it doesn't happen only in this presidency. You will find it elsewhere. You'll find it in South Africa.
Which does not make it acceptable.
I think the question is, the events you are dealing with determine how you respond to them. And it may well be in a way that people don't necessarily cheer you up for it. But if people can't be expected to say things that are crazy, like I've had said in the last few days, and you expect the response to be so cultured, it is that finesse sometimes is thrown out the window, because maybe you don't need it for that circumstance.
So you're saying that in the case when Kenyans were concerned about their security and the president was out of the country in Abu Dhabi, and PSU put out a tweet saying, as you can see from the newspaper and the selfies, I'm back in the country, that because Kenyans were concerned of security and were frustrated that they're not hearing anything from the president, was okay to come from the PSU and kind of just hit back and say, yeah?
Yeah, I think the issue around there was just the inability by people at the time to laugh at themselves. And sometimes,
but to laugh at themselves when people are dying and their security is run away, how would
you can't be gloomy all your life. You can't. At my dad's funeral, I was laughing. He was being buried. I was laughing. You can't have this expression that in all serious issues you must forget your ability.
Certain issues a certain way, but most Kenyans will want to have reassurances and have a president coming out to say that this is what is going to happen. This is the reassurances I'm giving you. This is what we're planning to do. You may be able to laugh, and which is fine for you, but for many Kenyans at that particular time, the PSU, the communication from the presidency, just was a complete mess.
I think that they will, a lot of, and yes, you have to acknowledge there might be people that were disappointed that there was that tweet instead of a statement. If you're going to make a statement, it's got to be considered. You've got to take in advice from your key security people, which the president was doing all the time. What he was in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi to do was to meet the King of Jordan, to meet the Emir of Qatar, to meet about this terrorism and security threat.
So you in no way would take back any of the kind of manner PSU has at times communicated. And there are so many directors there. Most of the communications they'll put out, then there'll be this list of senior directors. What is it with all of these senior directors at State House? And who tweets the U Kenyatta handle? Who's in charge of the communication over at State?
I think that that's again being obsessed with the trivial thing about processes. I think in the end, it's a question of what in totality has the message been. And yes, there would be concern sometimes about the tone of our communication. Yes. And that has been expressed to me as well, and to my colleagues. But in this job, I think it's your tone is forever, I think, determined by the circumstances you face.
Okay.
And to an extent, how deep you want your message to travel.
Right.
And I think that in the case of our president, even with the whole disquiet at times about how he was dealing with security, I think time has then shown Kenyans that the president had a strategy around it, and that the security apparatus have emerged stronger, in fact. If you look at investor reports, they express confidence in the leadership of our security apparatus. The president has a plan and is implementing that plan. Our work is to support that plan. We may not always be as smooth as you want us to be, but the bottom line is that eventually we get that plan out there. And you can see the reviews in the last months actually reflect that our economy is growing, our people are getting, prosperity is around us, growth is around us. And these are the things that don't emerge in the first 6 months when you have nothing to show. Then you have rhetoric. Now you are seeing the kutenda part of kusema na kutenda.
All right. Before I let you go, a quick one, yes, perhaps or no, and maybe a bit of an explanation. There has been talk that Joseph Olelenku, who was a former cabinet secretary Interior, the president in his speech, which was, he talked about IG had resigned, made no mention of the fate of Olelenku. So there are those who say he's still drawing a salary. What would you say to that?
I don't have the detail on that. I would have to come back to you.
Okay. And we will end it there. Thank you very much, Manoah Esipisu, State House spokesperson, with us this morning on the person of interest. Quite a lot of your feedback that has come through. I'm so sorry you've not been able to tackle some of them, but director tells me we're completely out of time. However, we'll be sampling some of it towards the end of the show. Asanteni sana. Stay with us. When we return, Michael Gitonga will be on Your Health today. He tackles Earthlight. Yes, your health.